I am Park Chun-gun, living in Namjongdong, Suncheon City. I originally lived in a village called Dowolri in Sangsamyeon. I don't know the exact year I was born, but I am 85 years old. I was probably 7 years old then. What we call the suppression forces came. Since I was young, I didn't know exactly what was happening. But later I heard that the suppression forces had come. A military unit came to our village, which was quite big then. They ordered all the adults to gather at the village hall, while children were not allowed to come out. The children were kept inside, and only the adults were gathered. Some of the soldiers forced the adults to answer their questions, while others went their rounds in the entire village, searching each and every house. If they saw any children outside, they would beat them, claiming they might be delivering messages to the rebels. That's what those people did. My fourth youngest sibling was just a newborn, only a few months old. My mother carried her baby on her back and went to the adult gathering. The other three of us were told by the elders to stay quietly in the room, lying under blankets. I have an older sister and a younger brother. We are 4 siblings in total. While lying there, I felt the need to pee. So I went outside to the yard, as houses in the countryside had yards. I went to the edge of the yard to pee, and as I was peeing, I saw the police at the house across from ours, chasing a dog and causing a big commotion. After I finished peeing and went back into the room, my sister, 3 years older than me, told me to come back outside. When I came out, a policeman asked me where I had just been. So I told him I had been to pee. They asked if I had seen any rebels. There was no way I could have seen them. I was just a little 7-year-old kid. In those days, the adults told us to always say we didn't know anything if anyone had asked us questions. In fact, we didn't know anything at all. How could a child like me have seen any rebels? I just kept saying I didn't know. Alas, they pulled back the bolt on their gun and threatened to shoot me if I didn't tell them. But I didn't know anything, so how could I tell them anything? I truly didn't know. Our father had 3 brothers, and they all lived in the same village. My uncle's son was 1 year older than me, so he was 8 years old. He and his younger sister were crying out, saying they were starving, demanding food and making a big fuss. The police officer who had been pressuring me suddenly jumped over the fence and caught them. Where are you going? To send a message. They meant we were on the way to contact the rebels. They hit us here and there. We just cried. My eldest uncle saw that and said, "How could such little kids know anything? Why are you beating them like that?" In response, they kicked him all over. By the way, in our village there was a nice house that had a wooden floor with an empty space underneath. We would gather at that house, playing hide and seek and hiding under the floor. Oh no, they called that place a rebel hideout. They let the children go but ordered the owner of the house to come out. Why did you shelter rebels here? They were making ridiculous accusations, completely unreasonable. How could anyone have been harboring rebels there? They started beating him, accusing him of hiding rebels there, and giving meals to them. They made completely baseless claims. That day, they tied up my father and 5 others with ropes and took them away. Back then, there were no cars in our village and people got around on foot. They took them to the Sanksamayon police substation. Our eldest uncle, who had served as mayor of Sangsamyeon, was shot to death by the rebels. At that time, my aunt was pregnant with her youngest child. She thought they might listen to a pregnant woman, so she went to plead. But they wouldn't listen. They wouldn't listen at all. My father and the villagers were taken to the Suncheon police station, where they stayed for a night. When they were taken away, our entire family followed them. When we arrived at the police station, it was night time, and we went to sleep. At night, they were taken out to a place called Dangoge Pass near Suncheon. It was there that they were killed. People said they heard gunshots. Our entire family, young and old, even with babies on their backs, ran all over Dangoge Pass, searching everywhere, but we couldn't find them. When we were about to rest, my eldest uncle went to a house at the top of the pass to ask for some water. When the elderly woman of the house asked what he was doing, he said, "They killed some people, so I'm searching for the bodies." She said she heard gunshots from somewhere beyond last night. So thinking that they must have been killed there, they began searching everywhere in the mountains. Not far down from the tavern, there was a small pond. Right next to it, they were shot and killed. It was 2 days after the gunshots when we found them. Flies were swarming everywhere as people approached the spot. When we got closer, we found that 5 people had been executed by gunfire. They had been left in one place, covered with a piece of straw mat. So, my uncles found my father and carried him on a wooden carrier all the way to Dowell in Sangsa through the night. They buried my father in the mountain behind our village. That's how my father passed away. When my father passed away, I was only 7. I never forget it. It's absolutely unforgettable. It's as vivid in my mind as if it had happened yesterday. The suppression forces were truly terrible. The other victims were also beyond words. They were beaten and thrown into a dirt pit. They were tied together and shot to death 5 at a time. One of them collapsed before being shot and he survived. Those who didn't collapse were killed. Those who collapsed were assumed to be dead. And they survived. That's what happened back then. We couldn't even talk about it. It was unspeakable. We were too young to fully understand or express what had happened. As far as I remember, my house had a narrow wooden floor on which I would play by holding onto my father's neck because I loved him so much. The wooden floor was a bit higher than the yard. Once I accidentally fell off while walking on it and got hurt. My head was bleeding. Seeing me like that, my father felt so sorry for me. He treated my injury and took care of me tenderly. When the school told us to bring packed lunches, we couldn't even pack any because there wasn't enough rice at home. That's how we lived in a world where people starved to death. We lived through such an unimaginable and harsh world. My mother's life was unimaginably difficult. She was skilled at sewing and making clothes, so people called her seamstress. She often worked on sewing for other families and endured so much hardship. In the end, she passed away after a life full of struggles. She lived silently, bearing all the hardships on her own. My grandmother passed away about 2 years after my father. I don't remember much, but I heard that my father and my grandmother had had a fight. When they argued, my father had a tendency not to speak much. It was the same with my grandmother. I heard her say, "If I had known he would die like that, I should have at least spoken to him." She meant she didn't know he would die like that. I understand what she meant. And my grandmother would always take me with her, holding my hand wherever she went. She would constantly cry, saying, "If I had known he was going to die, I would have at least spoken to him." But I didn't. I know that because she always took me with her everywhere. Talking about this makes me shudder. The memories keep coming back and are stuck in my head. The things I experienced as a child are etched in my mind. All I can do is share my story when people ask. I tell them, this is how I've lived. My parents passed away like this, and this is how I've survived. I suppose no one has ever lived a life full of hardship like mine. As for people like me, whose parents or siblings died, others say things like they didn't die or they died. There might be some people who wrongly claim that their family members died. All of that needs to be resolved too. I just hope everyone is treated equally, though I don't know how that can be done.
여순 사건이
would be great if everything that happened during
된 것을 전부 다
the Yosun incident could be fully
해결해
resolved.
좋지. 거의 다 해줬으면
We've always hoped that will be addressed and resolved.
여순 사건이.